Well, this is a wild rose, and right here it happens to be growing along a fence line because they like to grow there. But out in the wild, they'll grow along streams and riparian zones, but also out along rocks where they have a little shelter and extra rainfall that accumulates on the surface of the rock and flows down along the edges. But roses were used quite a lot for different things. These rose hips are right in season now, so they're dark red, and they have very tough seeds in them. So you cut them in half when they're fresh, you can see all of those seeds inside. And they're associated with a kind of a hairy pulp that's around the seeds. And you don't eat that. So they're very hard. They're stone hard, so you can't really break them open with your teeth. So when you make tea out of these, you usually scoop out the seeds and just use the outside. And actually these outside skin and flesh of the fruit, called the rose hip, was considered a survival food by the Indians. They didn't normally eat it in their diet fresh like this, but they did consider it a survival food because in those rose thickets they're very common, and you can get a lot of rose hips and eat them if you scrape out the inside and eat them fresh like this, but only under conditions where you can't find your regular food. So it's a desperation food to eat them raw. So making tea out of the rose hips, you don't have to take the seeds out, but you usually split them in half and throw them in boiling water after they're dry. It's said that some of these wild roses have in 3 rose hips as much vitamin C as an orange. The red color are bioflavonoids, which assist vitamin C and the other vitamins so that they're nutritious from the standpoint of cofactors, the flavonoids that help other vitamins work. They also are very high in the B vitamins, high in vitamin K, which is a precursor to the clotting factors for blood, so your blood stays healthy as far as clotting time. So in the old days, people made tea out of this. The Indians made tea out of this in the winter time. They take these rose hips and dry them, which is the preferred way to make tea out of rose hips, is to dry them first till they're totally dry, and then when you put them in boiling water, the vitamins and minerals escape into the water, and it's very nutritious tea. Also tastes good. But that's not the only thing that people did with roses. The bark of the rose could be peeled off. You could see in the stems you have thorns, but if you take a knife and peel up along the edge of the bark, you can make a bark tea, which is good for several things. It helps to regulate blood pressure. The bark has an antibacterial effect, so it's a tea you can use for sore throats, which is mainly what it was used for. But interestingly, the bark was also used by the Indians in a tea for snow blindness. When your eyes are exposed to very bright sunlight reflected off of snow, it can be very irritating, and you can actually lose your sight for several days. And using tea made out of this bark was the treatment for snow blindness. The petals, when these roses are blooming, they have pink or red petals to the flowers. Those are used for an upset stomach. So it's a useful tea from the petals, the rose hips, and the bark. And the roots of the rose family in general, including these wild rose plants, this is called woods rose, Rosa woodsii. The roots are used as an astringent, so they can be put in wounds to slow down bleeding, but they were mostly used as a treatment for diarrhea. It's a tea made from the roots of the wild rose. When they're in the right habitat, which is often along trail sides or along fence lines or sometimes around the bases of cottonwood trees, they'll produce a lot of seeds, maybe 10 or 15 viable seeds inside one of these rose hips. And if they're allowed to mature, the bears don't get them, for instance, or birds, they'll drop a lot of seeds right around the original rose bush and fan out and spread and form these thickets that you can't walk through because of the thorns. So they're known to occur in the wild in these spread out thickets that can be 20, 30 feet long, impenetrable. Even animals don't go through those. And in those cases, they protect themselves, and the interior stems can grow very long and straight to get out to the sunlight. And those are the ones that are used for arrow shafts, because rosewood is very, very hard and it doesn't warp after it dries. So for making arrows, for hunting, the rose wood was highly prized.